Hey everybody, Kyle Gingras here, Vineyard Manager at Epoch Estate Wines. Hey, I'm sitting in block 2B in the Paderewski Vineyard today. This is a block of Grenache that we have that's usually a main component to our sensibility bottling. Today is April 14th. We are in the middle of what I would call a slow spring here in West Paso. And I just wanted to take a few minutes to show you some different stages of Budbreak that we have happening out in the vineyard between all the different varieties. So grapevines are a deciduous plant, which means that in the fall or coming into the winter months, they lose all their leaves and they go into a state of dormancy or a state of sleep. And they stay that way all through the winter months. And then when the temperatures start to climb, most importantly, the soil temperature, once the soil temperature hits an average of about 50 degrees, then the deciduous plants, or grapevines in this case, they start to come out of their dormancy, and we use the term bud break or bud burst to signify that moment in the vineyard stage. So as you can see behind me, the Grenache is in about the 1 to 2 inch growth level here. We have green tissue and leaves are starting to unfold. We're at the top of the hill now, but why don't we take a little stroll down to the bottom of the hill where the temperatures are a little bit colder, and we might be able to find some buds that are still pretty tight and closed so that we could take a look at what the vines look like during their dormancy stage and how they look once we've pruned them and are waiting for spring and bud break to happen. So this block of Grenache that we're in is a bilateral cordon trained block that we do spur pruning on. And if we zoom in here, you can see how we have spurs kind of moving down so here's a spur and here's a spur. As we go down the cordon, we have spur positions that are going to hold this year's canopy, the green tissue. And if we kind of get in closer here, we can see right about there is a little bump on the lower end of our spur, and that is a bud. So when the grapevines are dormant, these buds look like this, really tight and closed. They're covered with little scales. And these buds formed during last year's green growing period, when our now woody spur was a green shoot. At the nodes where the leaves are hanging, these little buds form. And after we get through the new year and we want to set the stage for this year's growing season, we come in and prune. And like I said, this block just happens to be spur pruned. And so we leave 2 of these buds per spur in a block like this. And you can see that this basal bud has not come out of dormancy yet because we're still down at the bottom of the hill where it stays really cold. So it will come out, it's just delayed. And then we have our bud over here that's pushing, and that is the first step of bud break or bud burst. What you see here is this little ball of cotton is starting to come out of those scales that cover the bud during winter. So as I was walking up this vineyard row of Grenache, I found this shoot that's just long enough and just open enough to see our fruit clusters that we're going to be working with this year. So you can see how the leaves are starting to unfold in an alternating pattern up the shoot. And this right here, this kind of conical shaped, red colored bunch is going to be our Grenache cluster for the year. There's another one on this side, right behind that leaf. And so as we get through spring, and probably more like in the middle of May, in about a month from now, month and a half, those clusters are going to flower in a period what we call bloom. And during that bloom time is when the fruit, each individual berry will set on the cluster for our vintage 2020 harvest. And as you can see right now, that cluster is not even the size of my thumbnail. And by the time we get to harvest, even after we do some cluster size manipulation, that cluster should be larger than a handful for me and probably weighing about 1/3 of a pound in weight. And that's where it starts. Just wanted to take a quick second to talk about the timing of Budbreak. And for us here in West Paso Robles, usually Budbreak is right around St. Patrick's Day, so March 17th, give or take. The earlier varieties might be a touch before that, like Grenache and Tempranillo, and then the later varieties a touch later, like Mourvedre. But this year we're looking more like an April 1st average Budbreak date. So 10 days to 2 weeks later than a normal year. And what that means for us, I don't really know per se, but if anything, we might see a slightly later start to harvest this year than we would usually see. Something probably more similar to the 2019 vintage. All right, so we moved on from our block of Grenache at the Paderewski Vineyard, and now we are in a block of Zinfandel, the Primitivo clone that we have out here. And I just wanted you to get a sense of the difference in growth stage here. Same day, April 14th, 2020. And this is our Primitivo clone of Zinfandel compared to the Grenache that we were just in. And here we are in our block of Tempranillo. So as I'm walking here over to block B, Syrah, I thought I'd point out that you might see that we still have our cover crop growing in between our vine rows. We seeded for the cover crop, post-harvest last year, 2019, in the fall, the winter months. And luckily we have had glorious rainfall this year, kind of front-loaded in November and December and the first part of January. And then it kind of took a break for the second half of January and most of February. And we were fortunate enough to have what we like to call Miracle March, save the day. Brought in a great amount of rainfall, like 5 to 6 inches in March, and then we actually got another 2 to 3 inches in the first part of April here. So anyway, cover crop is looking lush. It's a mixture of barley grass, fava beans, and sweet peas. And you can see it's quite tall in some rows, almost as tall as our cordons. And so we're getting ready to cut that stuff down as we speak, which is a tactic that's important to help us keep those cold temperatures away in case we get a frost event. Anyway, back to the vines here. So we are now in the bottom of the hill in block B Syrah, another cordon train spur prune block. And for me personally, I think Syrah is one of the prettiest varieties when it's going through Budbreak. It has this awesome like pink rim to the leaf blades or the buds, and the hue of the green tissue is almost kind of like a pastel lime green color. I just love the look of it. Here, I'll zoom in on this guy. It's a good example. Love it. So anyway, as I was saying earlier, Grenache is our first variety out here, usually followed by Tempranillo, but Tempranillo seems to be a little later this year. And then we have Syrah and Zinfandel seem to be pretty on track. And then after that, our latest budding variety is Mourvedre. And we will hop into a section of Mourvedre in a hot minute. All right, we made it into one of our blocks of Mourvedre here, which is a variety that's the backbone to our Veracity bottling. It's kind of our ode to Chateauneuf de Pape, but it's a Mourvedre dominant blend. And this variety is one of our last to to push bud or have bud break. You can see as we're going down the row, things are a little bit smaller than others, but maybe not too noticeably if we're comparing it to the Zin that we looked at. Hey everybody, I just wanted to say thank you for joining me on our stroll through the Budbreak Vineyard today, checking out the different stages of bud break. If you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to shoot us an email, find us on Facebook, comment on this video. We'll be more than happy to continue the discussion through those formats. Otherwise, in the meantime, everybody stay happy and healthy out there, okay? Cheers.